The cowboy found a weeping Apache widow in the rain and said, "You're my wife." He had been riding for hours, checking fences and moving cattle for the small ranch he had inherited from his father. The wind whipped at his coat, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. It was the kind of storm that made even the most seasoned cowboy uneasy, but James was used to the rough weather. Still, something in the air made him uneasy today, a strange feeling he couldn't shake. As he rode along the muddy trail, James noticed movement in the distance. At first, he thought it might be another rider, but then he saw the figure of a woman struggling against the wind and rain. Her clothes were soaked and clung to her body, and her head was bowed, as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She seemed almost part of the storm, small and fragile against the wide, empty plains. James slowed his horse, squinting through the sheets of rain. He had seen travelers in trouble before, but there was something different about this woman. She moved with a kind of quiet desperation, staggering as she tried to hold onto a bundle of belongings. Her face was hidden beneath the hood of her coat, but her sorrow was clear even from a distance. "Ma'am," James called out as he drew closer, his voice cutting through the sound of the rain. He dismounted, leaving his horse to shake the water from its mane. "Do you need help?" James could see the fear in her eyes now, the wariness that comes from a life spent facing danger and loss. He could tell she had reasons to be cautious, reasons he would never fully understand. But he also saw something else: exhaustion, sorrow, and the need for shelter, even if she didn't admit it. "It's all right," James said gently, taking a few steps closer but keeping his hands visible. "You don't have to be afraid. I can help you get out of this rain." She wrapped it around herself quickly, shivering as the warmth began to chase away some of the cold. "I thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling. I don't know where I'm going. I've got a place you can stay tonight. It's warm and I've got food. Besides, it's pouring rain, and I can't leave you out here to get sick." James helped her inside, where the warmth from the fireplace made the air feel almost soft and comforting after the harsh cold outside. "Sit by the fire," James said, placing a chair near the flames. "I'll get you some dry clothes and a hot meal." James went to the chest where he kept extra clothing and handed her a dry dress and a pair of woolen socks. She accepted them silently, changing quickly behind the curtain he had set up for privacy. When she returned, her hair dripping but her clothes dry, James had already started preparing a simple meal: bread, soup, and coffee. He placed a bowl in front of her and waited patiently as she began to eat. She was quiet, her eyes still shadowed with grief, but James didn't press her to speak. He knew that sometimes people needed silence more than words. After a while, she finally spoke, her voice low and hesitant. "My name is Leela," she said. "Leela Redfeather." "Nice to meet you, Leela." He offered a small smile. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." He could feel the weight of her sorrow, the kind of grief that settles deep in a person's bones. He had seen loss before, and he knew there were no easy words to fix it. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I can't take away the pain, but you won't be alone tonight. You've got shelter, warmth, and food." "That's a start. If you want, you can rest here tonight. Tomorrow, we can figure out what to do next." As the evening wore on, James stoked the fire and prepared a bed for her in the corner of the cabin. Leela sat quietly, staring into the flames, thinking about the journey that had brought her here, the life she had lost, the loneliness that had followed her, and now, this stranger who had offered her kindness without question. The night grew darker and the storm outside raged on. But inside the small cabin, there was warmth and safety. Leela finally allowed herself to relax, feeling the exhaustion of her travels and her grief weigh on her. She curled up under the blanket James had given her and drifted into a restless sleep, the sound of the rain lulling her into dreams she hadn't had in years. James watched her for a moment, then turned his attention back to the fire. He thought about the unexpected turn of events, how a simple ride through the storm had brought him to this moment, sharing his cabin with a woman he barely knew. Yet, he felt a quiet certainty that meeting Leela was no accident. The world had a way of putting people together when they needed each other most. Outside, the rain continued to pour, the storm showing no sign of letting up. But inside, there was hope. In the warmth of the cabin, with the fire crackling and the scent of wet earth lingering, a fragile trust was beginning to grow. It was a trust born not of obligation, but of simple human kindness, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, there could be moments of light. By the time the night reached its deepest hour, Leela slept soundly, and James finally allowed himself to relax. He knew tomorrow would bring challenges, questions, and perhaps more danger. But for now, they were safe. And sometimes safety, even for a single night, was enough to start healing a broken heart. The storm outside seemed endless, but James knew that every storm passed eventually. And when it did, there would be a new day, one where trust could grow, and perhaps life could begin again. For now, he sat quietly by the fire, keeping watch over Leela, the stranger in the rain who had unexpectedly entered his life, and feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't known he was missing. In the quiet of the storm, two lives had crossed paths, and though neither fully understood what the future held, both felt the subtle, unspoken promise of safety, care, and the faintest spark of hope. The morning sun struggled to break through the heavy clouds, casting a soft, gray light over the small cabin. Leela woke slowly, the warmth of the blanket still wrapped around her. The storm from the previous night had passed, leaving the earth damp and fresh, with the scent of wet grass and mud in the air. She looked around, noticing the small but tidy cabin, the fire's remnants in the hearth, and James quietly preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "I hope you slept well." "Thank you." Leela watched him at first, unsure if she should help or remain a guest. She had been on her own for so long, used to surviving in solitude, that accepting help felt strange and uncomfortable. Yet she also felt a quiet pull to be part of this small, steady life, if only for a moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice hesitant. "May I help? There's always something to do around here. You don't have to, but it's welcome." For a while, they worked in silence, the quiet only broken by the sounds of the animals and the distant calls of birds returning after the storm. Leela watched James carefully, noticing the ease with which he moved, the way he respected the land, and the kindness in the way he treated every living thing. It was different from the world she had known, harsh and unyielding, full of people who fought for survival at the cost of others. Here, she felt a strange safety, a sense that someone truly cared without asking anything in return. As they worked, James spoke casually about life on the ranch, the challenges, the routines, and the small victories that made each day meaningful. Leela listened, occasionally asking questions. She began to share small pieces of her past, stories of her home, her family, and her husband. She did not speak of the loss that haunted her every moment, only fragments that revealed her resilience and strength. James listened without judgment, only offering understanding and empathy. In the afternoon, the townspeople began to stir. Word had spread that a woman had been found at the cabin after the storm. Some were curious, others suspicious. When a few neighbors stopped by, whispering about the stranger, Leela felt the familiar prick of unease. She had learned long ago that outsiders could be cruel, judgmental, and quick to assume the worst. James noticed her tension immediately. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "We know the truth, and that's what matters." She admired the rolling hills, the sturdy fences, and the wide-open skies. The land was harsh yet beautiful, a place where life depended on hard work and respect for nature. She remembered stories her husband had told her of the plains, the wind, and the storms, memories that brought both sorrow and comfort. Here with James, she felt a connection to the land, a reminder that life could continue even after great loss. James continued to help her adjust, teaching small skills she had not used in years, tending to the fire, mending clothes, and handling simple tools. At first, Leela was hesitant, unsure of herself after months of isolation. But James was patient, guiding her gently without pressure or impatience. Slowly, she regained confidence, learning to trust herself again, and realizing that she could survive not just alone, but alongside someone who respected her choices. Evening came quietly. The cabin glowed with the warmth of the fire, the soft light reflecting off the wooden walls. Leela sat by the hearth, wrapped in a blanket while James prepared dinner. They spoke little, but their silence was not uncomfortable, it was companionable. In those quiet moments, a subtle bond began to form, a connection built on shared experiences and mutual respect. As night fell, Leela began to speak more freely, telling James about her husband, the love they shared, and the life they had dreamed of building together. She spoke not to dwell on the past, but to honor it, to acknowledge the strength it had given her, and to recognize the courage it took to survive. James listened carefully, offering small comments, questions, and encouragement. He did not pity her, nor did he try to fix her grief. He simply acknowledged it and made space for her to share. By the time she finished, the rain had started again, soft and gentle this time. Leela looked out the window at the falling drops, feeling a strange sense of peace. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that life could continue, that she could find safety and companionship, and that she might someday feel joy again. James noticed the change in her demeanor. He saw the tension in her shoulders ease, the shadows in her eyes soften, and the faintest hint of a smile appear on her lips. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. He knew that trust could not be forced. It had to grow naturally, nurtured by patience, kindness, and shared experience. The night grew colder, and Leela prepared to rest once more. James offered her the bed near the fire, insisting that she take comfort and warmth while he took the smaller cot in the corner. Leela hesitated, then accepted, recognizing the gesture not just as a convenience, but as a symbol of care and respect. As she drifted off to sleep, she reflected on the day. The storm had brought her here, to a place of unexpected safety. James had offered not only shelter but also understanding, respect, and a quiet strength she could rely on. She felt a faint, almost imperceptible spark of trust, a fragile seed that could grow into something meaningful if nurtured with care. Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, washing the plains and carrying away the remnants of the previous night's storm. Inside the cabin, the fire burned steadily, casting a warm glow over the two occupants. One was a man who had lived a life of hard work, patience, and quiet integrity. The other was a woman who had known loss, grief, and the harshness of the world. Together, in that small, humble cabin, they began to create a space where trust, understanding, and hope could take root. By the end of the night, both were asleep, the storm outside serving as a lullaby rather than a threat. And though neither fully understood what the future held, both felt the unspoken promise of safety and companionship. It was the beginning of a journey that would test their strength, courage, and hearts. But for now, it was enough to simply be present, to care for one another, and to begin the slow, delicate process of healing. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and wildflowers that had begun to bloom after the rain. James and Leela were up early, tending to the small tasks that kept the cabin running. The storm had passed, but the plains still bore the signs of its fury: mud slicks, broken branches, and waterlogged paths. For James, this was part of life on the land, but for Leela, who had lived through so much loss, it was a reminder that life was fragile and unpredictable. As Leela carried a basket of eggs to the kitchen, she noticed movement near the edge of the tree line. At first, she thought it was a deer, but then she saw figures of rough men, unfamiliar and unwelcoming. Her heart tightened and a shiver ran through her. James, noticing her sudden hesitation, looked up from the fire. "Trouble?" he asked, his voice calm but alert. Leela nodded, pointing toward the edge of the woods. "Men, I don't know them. They're watching." He had encountered men like this before, strangers who took what wasn't theirs, who looked for weakness to exploit. He stepped outside, leaving Leela behind near the fire and assessed the situation. There were 3 men, rough and confident, moving with an ease that suggested experience in causing fear. They carried tools and weapons, the kind that could intimidate even the strongest. James returned quickly, kneeling beside Leela. "Stay inside," he said quietly. "Lock the door, I'll handle this." For the first time in a long while she felt safe. The men approached the cabin, their boots squelching in the mud. One of them spoke, his voice rough. "Hey there, friend, we're just passing through, don't mean no trouble. Out here, everything belongs to whoever has the guts to take it." The standoff did not last long. James was prepared for conflict if necessary, but he hoped it wouldn't come to that. He spoke again, firm and unwavering. "Leave now, or you'll regret it. This ain't over." You protected me," she whispered, almost in disbelief. James nodded. "That's what I do, you're safe here." Despite the earlier threat, there was a quiet strength in the moment, a realization that danger could be faced and overcome when trust and courage were present. By late afternoon, James suggested they take a short walk to check the nearby stream. Leela agreed, and together they moved carefully, scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble. The earth was muddy, the path slippery, but the air was fresh, filled with the smell of rain and the sound of birds returning to their nests. As they walked, Leela spoke softly, sharing stories of her husband, the life they had dreamed of, and the family she had lost. James listened quietly, offering comfort not through words alone, but through his steady presence. He did not try to change her grief or make it go away. He simply acknowledged it, giving her space to express herself freely. They reached the stream, where the water flowed quickly from the hills. Leela knelt by the edge, dipping her hands into the cool water. James watched her, noticing the delicate way she moved, the careful attention to the small details of the world around her. It reminded him that even after great loss, people could still find beauty and purpose if given a chance. Suddenly, Leela noticed something in the water, a small bundle caught among the rocks. She reached in and pulled it out, revealing a child, no more than 6 or 7, shivering and soaked. James rushed forward, lifting the boy gently into his arms. Leela's eyes widened in shock and concern. He's alone," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to help him." The evening stretched into night. The child slept peacefully, and Leela finally allowed herself to rest as well, sitting beside the fire and leaning against James. The events of the day, the threat from the men, the discovery of the child, and the shared responsibility of protecting life, had drawn them closer. They no longer needed words to understand each other. Their bond had deepened through action and care. In the quiet moments, James spoke softly. "You did well today," he said. "Not just with the boy, but with everything. You've shown courage, strength. But with you here, I feel safe." She had come to the plains carrying grief, fear, and uncertainty, but she was beginning to understand that trust could be built, that courage could grow in unexpected ways, and that protection and kindness were not just words, they were actions, tangible and real. James watched her from across the room, noting the subtle shift in her demeanor. She was no longer tense, no longer entirely guarded. The shared struggles of the day, facing danger, protecting the innocent, and surviving the storm, had forged a connection between them that went beyond simple companionship. It was a bond built on respect, understanding, and mutual care. As the fire burned low, James finally spoke again, his voice quiet but certain. "Life can be hard out here. But it's better when someone stands by you, don't you think?" Inside the cabin, 2 lives were intertwined by circumstance, choice, and the shared experience of survival. One had been alone for much of his life, hardened by work and responsibility. The other had been lost in grief and fear, unsure if the world still held goodness. Together, they were learning that even in the harshest circumstances, trust, courage, and compassion could create something enduring. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Leela felt a sense of purpose and connection she had not known in years. James had proven not only his strength, but also his integrity and patience. She realized that life could still offer moments of hope, even after the deepest sorrow. The events of the day had changed something fundamental between them. The fear that had once defined Leela's life had been replaced, slowly, with trust and the knowledge that she did not have to face the world alone. James, in turn, had seen the quiet resilience that lay beneath her grief, a strength that complemented his own, and he felt a growing sense of respect and admiration. Together, they prepared for the days ahead, aware that life would continue to present challenges. But the bond they had formed, forged in adversity and strengthened by shared experiences, gave them both the courage to face whatever came next. They were no longer two strangers brought together by chance. They were allies, companions, and the beginning of something more profound, something neither fully understood yet. Outside, the plains were alive with the sounds of a world reborn after the storm. Inside, the cabin was a sanctuary, a place of warmth, trust, and the quiet beginnings of hope. For James and Leela, the challenges of the day had revealed the possibility of a future built on courage, care, and the promise of mutual support. And as they moved forward together, each small act of kindness, protection, and understanding laid the foundation for a bond that could withstand any storm. The plains had settled into a quiet calm, the sky a soft blend of gold and pink as the sun rose above the horizon. The storm that had tested them all had long passed, leaving behind a world refreshed and renewed. The morning air smelled of wet grass and earth, carrying with it a sense of possibility. For James and Leela, this new day brought more than just light. It brought clarity, reflection, and the chance to move forward together. Leela sat by the window of the cabin, watching the sunlight dance across the hills. Her thoughts wandered over the days that had passed, the storm, the fear, the shared moments of survival, and the small but meaningful gestures that James had shown her. She thought about how quickly he had become a constant in her life, someone she could rely on without hesitation, someone whose presence made the world seem less harsh. James approached quietly, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables and eggs he had collected from the nearby farm. He placed it on the table, smiling as he noticed Leela's reflective expression. "Good morning," he said gently. "Sleep well." "James, do you ever wonder if life can really change, if people can find happiness after everything they've lost? Sometimes it just takes the right person or moment to help them see it." They tended to the small garden outside the cabin, repaired fences, and checked on the animals. Leela's confidence grew as she moved among the chores, feeling a sense of purpose and belonging. James guided her patiently, praising her efforts and encouraging her to trust her instincts. Each small success built her strength, and with it, her trust in him. By midday, James suggested they take a walk to the nearby creek. Leela agreed, eager to feel the sun on her face and enjoy the tranquility of the world beyond the cabin. As they walked, the earth soft beneath their boots, the gentle murmur of the creek welcomed them. Birds sang in the trees, and the scent of wildflowers mingled with the fresh air. For Leela, it was a rare moment of peace, a reprieve from grief, fear, and the harsh memories of the past. They reached a flat stretch by the creek, where the water shimmered in the sunlight. James stopped and looked at Leela with a seriousness she had not seen before. "Leela," he began, his voice quiet but firm, "the time we've spent together, I've come to care for you more than I ever expected. You've shown strength, courage, and kindness in ways I admire. I want you to know that I see you truly, and I want to stand by you for the rest of my life." She searched his eyes, seeing the honesty, the steadiness, and the depth of feeling that had guided him through every moment since their first encounter in the rain. James continued, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "I know we've both been through hardships. I know life has not been easy, but I want you to trust me. I want us to face whatever comes together. Leela, you're my wife." I think I'd like that," she said softly, her voice trembling but sincere. I want to trust you, James. I want to try." Leela rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the safety and certainty she had longed for during the darkest days of her life. They spent the afternoon walking along the creek, talking about small dreams, hopes, and the life they could build together. Leela shared her love of the land, her respect for traditions, and her desire to create a home filled with warmth and care. James spoke of his work on the ranch, his hopes for the future, and his belief that two people could create something stronger together than they ever could alone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, they returned to the cabin. James started a fire in the hearth while Leela prepared a simple dinner. They worked side by side, the familiarity of shared tasks reinforcing their growing bond. The cabin, once a place of temporary shelter, had become a home, a place of safety, warmth, and love. After dinner, they sat together by the fire, the glow illuminating their faces. Leela spoke quietly, her words thoughtful. "I never imagined that life could feel like this again. I was so used to fear, loss, and loneliness. But now it feels possible. And I owe that to you, James, to us." Leela took the bed near the fire and James lay on the cot beside her. They did not need words to feel connected. The comfort of shared presence, the quiet assurance of trust was enough. Outside, the plains were calm, the stars beginning to twinkle in the clear night sky. Inside, two hearts that had weathered so much were beginning to beat in harmony, ready to face the future together. Days turned into weeks, and life at the cabin settled into a rhythm. James and Leela worked together, caring for the land, the animals, and each other. They faced challenges, harsh weather, the demands of the ranch, and occasional visits from curious townspeople, but each obstacle strengthened their bond. Trust grew into love, respect deepened into partnership, and the cabin became a home in every sense of the word. Leela began to smile more freely, her laughter filling the cabin, blending with the sounds of the wind, the animals, and the land around them. She taught James small traditions from her past, while he shared his knowledge of the plains and ranch life. Together, they created a life that honored both their histories while building something new. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in brilliant hues of pink and gold, James and Leela stood outside, hand in hand. The plains stretched endlessly before them, a symbol of both freedom and opportunity. Leela looked at James, her eyes filled with gratitude, love, and a quiet joy she had not thought possible. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for trusting me, for protecting me, for believing in us. And now we can face anything." As night fell completely, the cabin glowed softly in the darkness, a beacon of warmth, safety, and new beginnings. The stars sparkled above, silent witnesses to a story of resilience, trust, and the quiet power of human connection. Leela rested her head on James's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and for the first time in a long time she felt truly at peace. The storm had passed. Life had tested them, shaped them, and brought them together. And now, with hearts open, trust established, and love growing quietly but surely, James and Leela were ready to face the future, side by side together, as partners, friends, and now, as husband and wife. In the vast, open plains, where the wind whispered through the grass and the stars shone endlessly above, they found something rare and precious. A life renewed, a bond unbroken, and the promise that even after the heaviest rains, love and hope could bloom once more.